Hunter's two-part trap worked perfectly. The first part was a simple pitfall, with razor-sharp spikes at the bottom to cripple anyone who stepped in it. He disguised the pit poorly, as if he was in a hurry or just plain incompetent, so that whomever came along would step past the pit and hit the second part, the real trap. That was a sapling, its branches whittled to deadly spikes, and then the whole tree bent down and away so that when the trigger was tripped, it would whip across the trail. A goblin warrior now dangled from the spiked sapling, dead as it could be. It was a big one, as far as goblins went. Alive, he probably stood 4.5 feet tall, and his filed sharp tusks were longer than Hunter's fingers. His chest and arms carried the scars of a dozen fights. His hair was braided with garish feathers of indigo and scarlet, and he wore a rude silver torque around his throat. He'd carried an ironwood club with a couple of jagged chunks of obsidian set in it to rip gashes in flesh, but the club now lay in a pool of blood under his feet, which hung a hand's width above the trail. Not a bad catch, Hunter said. He grasped the goblin's head by its lank green hair and looked into its wide, glassy red eyes. He then lopped its head off with his axe and tossed it down the trail, back the way it came. A big one, Chekwe agreed, and fresh. It was fresh. Blood still dripped slowly down its chest and legs to drip off its toes in the pool below. Suppose its friends are still nearby, Hunter asked. There were plenty of tracks in the dust on the mountain trail, and by the scuff marks they'd left in a hurry when this big fellow got spiked through the sternum. Goblins don't have quondam friends, Chekwe spat. But sure, they're probably nearby, probably bickering over who the chief is now. Hunter wiped his bloody hand on his robe and drank in the view of the valley to his south. The sun was low in the west and threw its beams through a few clouds and cast long shadows where the steep mountains loomed over the jungle, turning the dense green foliage nearly black. Down in the creek bottom to the south, he could see a long blaze of open ground, cattle grazing land. There was a farm there, a few miles to the east, out of sight from his vantage point. He'd scouted it a few times. It was a quiet place with a decent herd of cattle and a few goats. Maybe we'd better track them down, Hunter said. Wouldn't want him hitting that ranch. I'm all for killing goblins, Chekwe said, but I thought we were supposed to stay out of sight. Where there's a ranch, there's people. There's a few, Hunter nodded. A couple of hands. Greenies. A brown woman, too. Oh, you'd notice that, Chekwe giggled. Ever get close enough on your scouts to get a gander at her papayas? You're disgusting. She's probably the owner, probably a gentlewoman, and probably married. Actually, her husband probably went off to war and got himself killed, and now she yearns to be comforted, Chekwe giggled again. Too bad you're a monk, although you're the worst quondam monk I've ever known. I may be, Hunter shrugged. But are we going to go after those goblins or not? Hell yes, Chekwe replied.